The champagne flute felt surprisingly steady in my hand as I watched my father's face drain of color across the mahogany conference table. Vanessa Sterling sat beside him, her manicured fingers gripping his arm possessively while she stared at the legal documents I had just placed before them both. The corner office overlooking downtown Portland's skyline provided the perfect backdrop for what was about to unfold. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Natalie, sweetheart. Dad's voice cracked slightly, a sound I hadn't heard since Mom's funeral 8 years ago. There has to be some mistake here. I adjusted my blazer and met his gaze directly, feeling a calm I hadn't expected. No mistake, Dad. Everything's exactly as it should be. Vanessa's perfectly contoured face twisted into confusion as she scanned the papers. Her Botoxed forehead managed a slight furrow despite the treatments. I don't understand any of this legal jargon. David, what is she talking about? The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 hours ago, Vanessa had stood in our family kitchen, her designer heels clicking against the tile Mom had picked out 20 years earlier, announcing that she was tired of pretending to care about Dad's disappointing daughter. She had made it clear that any future she envisioned with my father didn't include space for me or my pathetic tech hobby that barely pays the bills. Now she was about to discover exactly how wrong she had been. The morning had started ordinarily enough. I had driven to Dad's house in my modest Honda Civic, the same car I'd been driving for 6 years. It served my purposes perfectly, allowing people to make assumptions about my financial situation that benefited me in ways they couldn't imagine. The suburban Portland neighborhood where I grew up looked exactly the same as it had in high school, with its neat lawns and middle-class sensibilities intact. Dad's pickup truck sat in the driveway next to Vanessa's bright red BMW convertible, a car that cost more than most people made in a year. The contrast always amused me, though I never commented on it. Let people draw their own conclusions. I had planned to stop by briefly to discuss some family business, specifically about Mom's jewelry collection that Dad had been talking about giving away. What I hadn't planned on was walking into a conversation that would change everything between us forever. The front door was unlocked, as always. Dad never worried about security in his quiet neighborhood, a luxury that came from never having anything truly valuable to protect. I called out as I entered, hearing voices from the kitchen. David, I'm serious about this. Vanessa's voice carried that sharp edge it got when she was working herself up to make a point. We need to think about our future together, and that includes making some difficult decisions about dead weight. I paused in the hallway, something in her tone making me hesitate before announcing my presence. Vanessa, she's my daughter. Dad's voice held a weariness I recognized. It was the same tone he had used during my teenage years when he didn't want to argue but felt obligated to defend me. A daughter who's 28 years old and still playing around with computers like she's in high school, Vanessa shot back. When was the last time she contributed anything meaningful to your life? When was the last time she even visited before you got sick? The accusation hit harder than I expected. Dad had been diagnosed with diabetes 6 months ago, and while it wasn't life-threatening with proper management, it had been a wake-up call for both of us. I had been visiting more frequently, trying to rebuild the relationship that had grown distant after Mom's death and my subsequent focus on building my career. She's doing her best, Dad said weakly. The tech thing, I don't understand it, but she seems to enjoy it. Enjoy it? Vanessa's laugh was sharp and humorless. David, wake up. She's nearly 30 and still renting that tiny apartment downtown. She drives a car that's older than my youngest nephew. She dresses like she shops at discount stores, which she probably does. This isn't about enjoyment, it's about failure. I felt my jaw clench involuntarily. The apartment Vanessa was referring to was a penthouse loft in one of Portland's most exclusive buildings, though I had gone to great lengths to ensure it appeared modest from the outside. The car was a choice, not a necessity. As for my clothes, I had learned early in my career that appearing too successful too young made certain business relationships more complicated. I just think, Vanessa continued, that if we're going to build a life together, we need to be realistic about the people we surround ourselves with. I'm not saying cut her off completely, but maybe it's time she learned to stand on her own feet. No more family dinners where she shows up empty-handed. No more birthday money. No more bailing her out when her little computer projects don't work out. I don't bail her out, Dad protested, though his voice lacked conviction. The 5,000 you gave her last Christmas. The money for her security deposit. David, you're enabling a grown woman to remain dependent on you, and honestly it's embarrassing. I almost laughed at the misunderstanding. The 5,000 had been a gift I allowed him to give me because refusing would have hurt his pride. I had donated it to charity the same week. The security deposit money had gone into a savings account I had opened in his name, earning interest until I could figure out how to give it back without damaging his self-respect. She's all I have left of Linda, Dad said quietly, invoking my mother's name like a shield. And Linda would want you to be happy. Vanessa countered smoothly. She would want you to have a partner who could match your energy, your ambition, someone who could be a true partner, not a burden. Natalie isn't a burden, isn't she? When was the last time she took you out for dinner? When was the last time she bought you a meaningful gift? I know she didn't contribute anything to your birthday last month. I'm the one who planned the entire celebration, bought the gifts, made the reservations. Where was your devoted daughter then? I remembered his birthday clearly. I had wanted to take him to his favorite steakhouse, the expensive one he had always talked about but claimed was too pricey. Instead, I had received a text that afternoon, saying Vanessa had already made plans and my presence wasn't necessary. I had sent a gift card, which apparently hadn't impressed anyone. Look, David, Vanessa's voice softened into the manipulative tone I had come to recognize. I love you, and I want to build something real with you. But I need to know that you're committed to our future, not trapped in the past. That means making some hard choices about who gets your time, your energy, and yes, your money. What are you suggesting? I think it's time for some tough love. No more handouts. No more treating her like a child who needs protecting. If she's really as capable as you think she is, she'll figure it out. If she's not, Vanessa let the implication hang in the air. And if she doesn't figure it out, then you'll know where you really stand with her. David, I've seen women like your daughter before. They use family guilt to avoid taking responsibility for their own lives. They play the victim card when things get tough. The only way to know if someone really cares about you is to see how they react when the easy support gets cut off. I don't know, Vanessa. It feels wrong. What feels wrong is watching a grown woman take advantage of your kindness while contributing nothing in return. What feels wrong is seeing you sacrifice your own happiness for someone who can't even be bothered to call unless she needs something. That accusation stung because it contained just enough truth to be believable. My calls to Dad had been infrequent, but not for the reasons Vanessa imagined. Every conversation seemed to revolve around his attempts to give me money, advice, or help I didn't need, and my efforts to politely decline without hurting his feelings had become exhausting. I want you to be happy, Vanessa continued, moving closer to him. I want us to travel, to build something beautiful together. But I can't compete with a grown woman who refuses to grow up. I won't compete with guilt over someone who doesn't appreciate what she has. She appreciates it, Dad said, but his protest sounded automatic. Does she? When was the last time she said thank you for anything? When was the last time she acknowledged how much you've done for her over the years? David, you raised her alone after Linda died. You worked 2 jobs to put her through college. You co-signed her student loans. You've been nothing but supportive of her little computer hobby, and what has she given you in return? I found myself holding my breath, waiting for his answer. The truth was complicated in ways neither of them understood. Dad had co-signed my student loans, but I had paid them off within 2 years of graduation. He had worked 2 jobs after Mom died, but I had been sending him anonymous money through a complicated system of gift cards and contest winnings to ease his financial burden. I had wanted to tell him the truth dozens of times, but his pride in his role as provider seemed too important to damage. She's trying, Dad said finally. Is she? Or is she comfortable letting Daddy take care of everything while she plays at being an entrepreneur? David, I've done some research on this tech startup scene. 90% of these companies fail. Most of these people are just avoiding real jobs and real responsibility. Maybe I should talk to her about it. Maybe you should do more than talk. Maybe it's time for some consequences. I'm not asking you to disown her, but I am asking you to prioritize our relationship. If she's really the independent woman you think she is, she'll understand. What exactly are you suggesting? Start small. Stop offering money. Stop solving her problems. If she calls asking for help, tell her you're not available. If she shows up expecting dinner, let her know you have other plans. Give her space to figure out her own life. And if she gets upset, then you'll know her priorities. David, a daughter who truly loves her father, wants him to be happy, even if it means stepping back and letting him build a new life. A daughter who's just using him will throw a tantrum when the benefits stop coming. I felt my hands curl into fists at my sides. The manipulation was masterful, I had to admit. Vanessa was reframing Dad's natural parental instincts as weakness, while positioning herself as the voice of reason and tough love. I suppose it makes sense, Dad said slowly. Maybe I have been making things too easy for her. You have, because you're a good man with a generous heart. But generous hearts can be taken advantage of, especially by people who should know better. All right, I'll try taking a step back. Good. And David? I think we should also talk about the jewelry. My attention sharpened. Mom's jewelry collection was the ostensible reason for my visit. What about it? Well, it's just sitting in that box, not doing anyone any good. Some of those pieces are quite valuable, aren't they? Linda always said she wanted Natalie to have them. But does Natalie deserve them?
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Has she earned them? David, your wife wanted her daughter to become a responsible, contributing member of society. If Natalie isn't living up to that standard, maybe the jewelry should go to someone who would appreciate it more. You want Linda's jewelry. I want us to make practical decisions based on reality, not sentiment. If Natalie proves she can take care of herself and contribute meaningfully to your life, then maybe she earns the right to inherit family heirlooms. But if she continues down this path of dependency and entitlement, why reward that behavior? I had heard enough. More than enough. I stepped into the kitchen, making my presence known with deliberate footsteps. "Morning, Dad," I said casually, as if I hadn't overheard the entire conversation. Vanessa jumped slightly, her face flushing with the guilty look of someone caught in the act. Dad turned toward me with a forced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Natalie, we weren't expecting you so early. I texted yesterday about coming by to discuss Mom's jewelry," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "But it sounds like you've already been discussing it." Vanessa recovered quickly, straightening her shoulders and lifting her chin with practiced defiance. "We were just talking about the future, Natalie. About what makes sense for everyone involved." "I see, and what makes sense?" Well, Vanessa glanced at Dad for support, then continued when he remained silent. "Your father and I have been talking about expectations and responsibilities. We think it might be time for some changes in how this family operates." "What kind of changes?" "The kind that help everyone grow," Vanessa said, her tone taking on the condescending quality I had come to despise. "Natalie, you're a grown woman, and it's time you started acting like one. That means taking responsibility for your own life instead of relying on your father for everything." "I see, and this is your opinion, or Dad's." Dad finally found his voice, though it sounded strained. "Natalie, we just think. Maybe it's time for you to really focus on making your own way, without the safety net." "The safety net," I repeated slowly. "The money, the gifts, the constant support." Vanessa elaborated. "Your father has been incredibly generous over the years, but it might be enabling dependency rather than encouraging growth." I nodded thoughtfully, as if considering this perspective seriously. "And Mom's jewelry will go where it's most appreciated," Vanessa said with a smile that didn't hide the triumph in her eyes. "Interesting," I murmured. "Dad, is this really how you feel?" He couldn't meet my gaze directly. I think maybe Vanessa has a point about independence." "Independence. Right." I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts, finding the number I needed. "Well, if we're talking about independence and taking responsibility, maybe it's time for some honesty all around." "What do you mean?" Vanessa asked, her confident expression flickering slightly. I said, dialing the number. "Maybe it's time everyone understood exactly what kind of responsibility I've been taking." Marcus Thompson answered on the second ring. "Natalie, perfect timing. I was just reviewing the quarterly reports. Are we still on for the investor meeting this afternoon?" "Actually, Marcus, I need a favor. Could you meet me at Dad's house in about an hour? And bring the portfolio files. All of them. Everything. The Catalyst acquisition, the cryptocurrency holdings, the real estate investments. Everything." I confirmed, watching Vanessa's face with interest. I think it's time for a family meeting. After I hung up, the kitchen fell into an uncomfortable silence. Dad looked confused while Vanessa appeared to be processing what she had just overheard. "Natalie," Dad said slowly. "What was that about?" "That," I replied, "was about taking responsibility. About being independent. About showing exactly what kind of daughter you raised." "I don't understand." "You will, I promised. In about an hour, you'll understand everything." Vanessa's eyes had narrowed, her predatory instincts clearly sensing a shift in the dynamic she couldn't quite identify. "Natalie, what game are you playing?" "No game," I said calmly. "Just transparency. You wanted to know about my independence, my contributions, my ability to take care of myself. I think it's time you got some answers. Your little computer job." Vanessa's laugh was sharp, but I detected an underlying nervousness. "Something like that." The hour that followed was perhaps the most awkward of my adult life. Dad attempted small talk while Vanessa sat in increasing agitation, clearly sensing that something fundamental had shifted, but unable to identify exactly what. I answered Dad's questions about my health and my apartment, while carefully avoiding any details that might spoil the surprise to come. When Marcus arrived, pulling up in his Tesla Model S, Vanessa's eyebrows rose slightly. He stepped out carrying a leather briefcase and a tablet, looking every inch the successful business executive he was. "Marcus Thompson," he introduced himself, shaking Dad's hand firmly. "I'm Natalie's business partner and financial advisor." "Business partner," Dad repeated, glancing at me with confusion. "Among other things," Marcus replied diplomatically. "Shall we sit down? We have quite a bit to discuss." We settled into Dad's living room, the same space where I had spent countless hours as a child doing homework while he watched evening news. Marcus opened his briefcase with practiced efficiency, withdrawing a stack of documents that immediately caught Vanessa's attention. Her eyes tracked every movement as he arranged papers on the coffee table with the precision of someone accustomed to high-stakes presentations. "Before we begin," Marcus said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses, "I want to establish some context. Natalie asked me here today, because there seems to be some confusion about her financial situation and career trajectory." Dad leaned forward in his recliner, the same chair he had occupied for 15 years. "Marcus, I appreciate you coming, but I'm not sure why this requires such formality. Natalie's always been private about her work, and that's fine. We're just having a family discussion about responsibility and expectations." "Actually, Mr. Brooks," Marcus replied, "I think this conversation is long overdue. Natalie has been protecting your feelings for years, but recent events suggest that protection may be doing more harm than good." Vanessa's perfectly manicured fingers drummed against the arm of the sofa. "I'm sorry, but who exactly are you?" "Some kind of financial planner." "Among other things," Marcus smiled. "I'm a venture capitalist actually. My firm has been working with Natalie for the past 4 years, ever since she sold her first company." The silence that followed was deafening. Dad's expression shifted from polite confusion to something approaching bewilderment. Vanessa's face had gone completely blank, as if she was struggling to process information that didn't align with her carefully constructed narrative. "Sold her first company," Dad repeated slowly. "Synergy Flow," Marcus confirmed, consulting his tablet. "A project management application specifically designed for small construction and contracting firms. Natalie developed it after studying inefficiencies in traditional project coordination methods. The acquisition price was $12.7 million. Dad's coffee mug slipped from his fingers, hitting the carpet with a dull thud. Coffee spread across the beige fibers, but nobody moved to clean it up. $12.7 million. Vanessa whispered, her voice barely audible.
That was her first exit, Marcus continued conversationally. Her current company, Catalyst Technologies, is valued at approximately $43 million, though recent investor interest suggests that number may be conservative. I watched Dad's face carefully, seeing the exact moment when the numbers became real to him. His mouth opened and closed several times without producing sound, like a fish struggling for air. "But she drives that old Honda," he said finally, as if this single fact could invalidate everything Marcus had just revealed. A deliberate choice. I spoke for the first time since Marcus had arrived. In my industry, appearing too successful too young can complicate business relationships. People make assumptions about your motivation, your hunger, your relatability to customers who are still building their own companies. Your industry, Vanessa said, her voice tight with something between disbelief and anger. You mean playing with computers? Marcus laughed, the sound sharp in the tense atmosphere. Miss Sterling, with respect, dismissing technology as playing with computers is like calling construction playing with blocks. Natalie's work has revolutionized how mid-sized businesses handle digital transformation. Her second company alone employs 47 people full-time and has contracts with companies across 6 states. 47 employees, Dad repeated, staring at me as if seeing a stranger. Good people, I confirmed. Marcus helped me structure the compensation packages to include equity sharing. Most of my team will be millionaires themselves when we go public next year. Go public, Vanessa's voice cracked slightly on the words. The IPO is scheduled for early next year, Marcus said, pulling out another document. Conservative estimates put Natalie's personal stake at somewhere between $60 and $80 million, depending on market conditions. The room fell silent again, the only sound coming from the antique clock on the mantel that had belonged to my grandmother. Tick, 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 marking seconds that seemed to stretch into hours. Dad finally found his voice, though it sounded strained and uncertain. Natalie, why didn't you tell me? Because you never asked about the work itself, I replied gently. You asked if I was making enough to pay rent, if I needed money for groceries, if my car was reliable. You never asked about revenue projections or customer acquisition costs or strategic partnerships. But I could have helped, could have been proud. You already were proud, I interrupted. You told everyone your daughter worked in technology. You bragged to your construction crew that I was some kind of computer genius. You didn't need to understand the business model to support what I was doing. Vanessa had been unusually quiet during this exchange, her sharp features frozen in concentration. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a dangerous edge. This is ridiculous. If you're so wealthy, why do you live in that tiny apartment? Why do you dress like someone who shops at thrift stores? Marcus reached into his briefcase again, this time withdrawing an iPad. Would you like to see the apartment? Before anyone could object, he had pulled up a real estate listing. The screen showed a stunning penthouse loft with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Willamette River. The kitchen featured custom Italian cabinetry and professional-grade appliances. The master suite was larger than most people's entire apartments. This sold last year for $2.4 million, Marcus said, swiping through professional photographs. Natalie paid cash. Dad leaned closer to the screen, his eyes widening as he took in details of the space. This is where you live. The listing photos are from before I moved in, I explained. I had it professionally decorated, but I prefer a more minimalist aesthetic than what's shown here. But when I've picked you up, Dad's voice trailed off as understanding dawned. I meet you at the coffee shop on the corner because it's easier than explaining why the parking garage requires special access codes, I said. The building has security protocols that can be complicated for visitors. Vanessa snatched the iPad from Marcus, scrolling through the photos with increasing agitation. This doesn't make sense. None of this makes sense. David, she drives that piece of junk car. She wears clothes from Target. Actually, Marcus interjected, that's a common misconception. Natalie's wardrobe is quite expensive, but she deliberately chooses pieces that don't scream luxury brands. It's a strategic choice that serves her business interests. Strategic, Vanessa repeated, her voice hollow. In tech, there's a delicate balance, I explained. You need to look successful enough to inspire confidence in investors and partners, but not so ostentatiously wealthy that potential customers feel alienated. Many of our clients are small business owners who have built their companies from nothing. They need to feel like we understand their challenges. And the car, Dad asked. Serves the same purpose. Plus it's reliable, fuel efficient, and doesn't attract unwanted attention. I own other vehicles, but the Honda is perfect for most situations. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed Dad a photograph of a gleaming BMW sports car parked in what appeared to be a private garage. This is what she drives on weekends. Jesus Christ, Dad breathed, studying the image. The Mercedes is for client meetings when image matters. Marcus continued, swiping to another photo. And the Tesla for environmental consciousness events. Different vehicles for different purposes.
Vanessa's face had cycled through several shades of red during this revelation. You've been lying to us. To your own father. I've been protecting him, I corrected. Dad raised me to be independent, to solve my own problems, to not burden others with my success or failure. I thought I was honoring those values. By making me look like a fool, Vanessa snapped. By letting me stand here and lecture you about responsibility when I've been what? I asked. My voice remaining calm despite the anger building in my chest. When you've been patronizing us. Looking down on us like we're some kind of charity cases. Marcus cleared his throat diplomatically. Miss Sterling, I think there may be some misunderstanding about Natalie's motivations. What misunderstanding? She's been playing games, making us think she needed help when she's been sitting on millions of dollars. Actually, Marcus said, consulting his tablet again, the financial assistance has been flowing in the opposite direction. What do you mean? Dad asked. Marcus hesitated, glancing at me for permission. I nodded reluctantly.
Mr.
Brooks, over the past 3 years, you've received approximately $47,000 in what you probably considered gifts, contest winnings, and fortunate coincidences. Dad's face went pale. What are you talking about? The radio contest you won last Christmas, the one that paid your property tax bill, the survey company that paid you $3,000 for participation in a customer satisfaction study, the rebate check from your insurance company that covered your medical expenses when you were diagnosed with diabetes. Those were real, Dad protested. They were real, Marcus confirmed. But they were also arranged and funded by Natalie through a series of intermediary companies. She's been quietly ensuring your financial stability without damaging your pride. The survey company, Dad's voice was barely a whisper, a subsidiary of one of Natalie's client firms. The insurance rebate was processed through a company that Natalie partly owns. The radio contest was legitimate, but Natalie arranged for you to receive the winning notification. Vanessa looked like she had been physically slapped.
You've been manipulating him financially.
I've been taking care of him, I said firmly. The same way he took care of me when I was building my first company and actually did need help. But you let him think he was supporting you, Vanessa.
They accused.
Because it made him happy, I replied. Dad's identity has always been tied to being a provider, a protector. Taking that away from him by flaunting wealth would have been cruel. So instead, you made him feel guilty about not doing enough for his struggling daughter. Vanessa shot back.
I never asked him for anything, I said, my voice growing harder.
Any money he offered, I tried to politely decline. When he insisted, I accepted it gracefully and donated it to charity in his name. Marcus nodded. We have records of donations totaling over $18,000 to various Portland area charities, all made in David Brooks' name, using money he had given to Natalie. Dad was staring at his hands, his shoulders shaking slightly. I don't understand any of this.
It's actually quite simple,
Marcus said gently. Your daughter built a successful business empire while maintaining a relationship with you based on the values you taught her. Independence, humility, family loyalty, and putting others' needs before your own. But the things Vanessa said about me not contributing, not appreciating, were based on incomplete information, I finished. Information I chose not to correct because I thought maintaining your privacy and dignity was more important than defending myself against accusations. Vanessa had been growing more agitated throughout this conversation, her perfectly styled hair beginning to show signs of the stress she was experiencing. This is insane. David, she's been lying to you for years. I've been loving him, I corrected.
There's a difference.
By treating him like a child who couldn't handle the truth. By treating him like a father whose opinion mattered more to me than impressing strangers with my bank account. Marcus intervened before Vanessa could respond. Perhaps we should discuss the practical implications of this situation. What practical implications? Dad asked, his voice still shaky. Well, Marcus said, pulling out yet another document. There's the matter of the family home. What about it? Vanessa demanded. According to county records, the property was refinanced 2 years ago to help cover some unexpected medical expenses and home repairs. The mortgage balance is currently about $43,000. That's private information, Vanessa snapped. It's public record, Marcus replied calmly. What's not public record is that the mortgage is held by a company called Brooks Family Holdings, which is owned entirely by Natalie. Dad's head snapped up.
What?
Your daughter bought your mortgage from the bank.
Marcus explained. She's been your actual lender for the past 18 months. But I've been making payments to Pacific Northwest Lending, Dad protested. A servicing company that processes payments on behalf of the actual lender, Marcus confirmed. Brooks Family Holdings. Your daughter has been collecting your mortgage payments, but she's also been depositing an equivalent amount into a savings account in your name. I don't have a savings account with $43,000 in it, Dad said. Marcus smiled. You do now. The account was opened this morning. Every payment you've made on your mortgage has been matched and saved. When the mortgage is paid off, you'll have enough money to buy the house a second time. Vanessa looked like she was going to be sick.
You bought his house.
I bought his debt, I corrected.
There's a difference.
He still owns the house. He's still responsible for maintaining it, paying property taxes, and making his monthly payments. The only thing that changed was who receives the interest. And what happens to that interest? It funds a college scholarship program for children of construction workers, Marcus answered. Natalie established the foundation 3 years ago. It's awarded over $200,000 in scholarships so far. Dad was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. You used my mortgage payments to help other people's kids go to college. Kids whose parents work as hard as you always did, I confirmed. Kids who might not otherwise have opportunities to pursue education that could change their lives.
Jesus, Natalie.
There's more, Marcus said, though he looked increasingly uncomfortable with each revelation. More. Vanessa's voice was approaching hysteria.
The jewelry.
Everyone turned to look at him. Marcus glanced at me again, and I nodded for him to continue. Mrs. Brooks' jewelry collection was appraised last year as part of estate planning discussions. The total value was approximately $87,000. $87,000. Dad repeated in shock. Your wife had excellent taste and an eye for investment pieces, Marcus said. Several items have appreciated significantly since her purchase. But what does that have to do with anything? Vanessa demanded. Marcus withdrew a final document from his briefcase. Natalie had the collection professionally cleaned, restored, and insured. It's currently held in a secure facility, with plans for it to be returned to the family home once appropriate security measures are installed. Security measures? Dad asked. The kind of security system appropriate for protecting nearly $90,000 worth of jewelry, I explained. I've been working with a company to design something that doesn't look intrusive, but provides professional-level protection. You've had Mom's jewelry this whole time. I've had it protected and cared for, I clarified. I was planning to surprise you with its return once the security installation was complete. I thought you might want to keep some pieces here, and perhaps give others as gifts when the time felt right. Vanessa had been listening to this exchange with growing horror. You plan to give it back? Of course, I said, genuinely puzzled by her reaction. It was never mine to keep permanently. Mom left it to me with the understanding that I would preserve it for the family. But this morning you said a lot of things, I interrupted, my voice growing cold. You said I was a burden, a disappointment, someone who took advantage of my father's generosity without giving anything in return. You suggested I didn't deserve my mother's jewelry because I hadn't earned it. I didn't know, Vanessa protested weakly. You didn't ask, I replied. You made assumptions based on appearances, and used those assumptions to justify some pretty cruel accusations. Marcus began packing his documents back into his briefcase, clearly sensing that his part in the revelation was complete. Mr. Brooks, I hope this information helps clarify some things about your daughter's situation. She's built something remarkable, and she's done it while maintaining the values you instilled in her. Dad nodded absently, still processing everything he had learned. Marcus, thank you for coming. This has been enlightening. My pleasure, sir. Natalie, I'll see you at the office for the investor meeting. Actually, I said, checking my watch, I think I need to stay here and finish this conversation first. Can you handle the meeting without me? Of course. The team knows the presentation inside and out. After Marcus left, the three of us sat in uncomfortable silence. Dad looked exhausted, as if the mental effort of recalibrating his understanding of his daughter had drained him completely. Vanessa appeared to be in some form of shock, her usual confident demeanor, replaced by something approaching panic. Finally Dad spoke. Natalie, I owe you an apology. No you don't, I said immediately. Yes I do. I listened to accusations about your character without defending you. I let someone convince me that my own daughter was taking advantage of me when the truth was exactly the opposite. Dad, you were trying to do what was best for everyone. I understand that, but I should have known better. I should have trusted what I knew about you instead of letting someone else define your worth. Vanessa finally found her voice, though it sounded hollow and defeated. I made a mistake. We both turned to look at her. She was staring at her hands, avoiding eye contact. I thought, she began, then stopped. I assumed things about you based on how you presented yourself. I was wrong. Yes, I agreed simply. You were, but you have to understand my position, she continued, some of her old defensiveness returning. David is a wonderful man, and I saw what I thought was someone taking advantage of his kindness. I was trying to protect him, from his own daughter, from someone I thought was using him, she clarified. And now that you know the truth. Vanessa was quiet for a long moment, clearly struggling with how to respond. When she finally spoke, her words came slowly, as if each one required careful consideration. Now I understand that I completely misjudged the situation. The clock on the mantel continued its steady rhythm, as we sat in the aftermath of Marcus's revelations. Dad's coffee stain had spread across the carpet, creating an abstract pattern that seemed to mirror the chaos of emotions filling the room. Vanessa remained frozen on the sofa, her carefully constructed worldview crumbling around her like a house of cards in a windstorm. I think, Dad said slowly, breaking the heavy silence, I need to understand exactly what happened here today. His voice carried a weight I hadn't heard before, the tone of a man who was beginning to grasp the magnitude of his mistakes. The same man who had taught me to change a tire, who had sat through countless school plays and science fairs, who had held me while I cried after Mom's funeral, was now looking at me as if seeing me clearly for the first time in years. What happened, I said carefully, is that some long overdue truths came to light. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably, her designer clothing suddenly seeming out of place in the modest living room. David, I want you to know that everything I said this morning, I truly believed was in your best interest. Your best interest, I corrected quietly, finally allowing some of my accumulated frustration to show. Let's be honest about motivations here.
That's not fair, Vanessa protested, but her voice lacked its earlier conviction. Isn't it this morning you were advocating for cutting me out of Dad's life entirely? You wanted him to stop supporting me financially, to stop including me in family decisions, and to give you Mom's jewelry instead of honoring her wishes. Now that you know those decisions would have cost him millions of dollars in hidden support and protection, suddenly you're concerned about fairness? Dad's eyes widened as the full implications hit him. Millions? The mortgage buyout alone saved you approximately $37,000 in interest over the life of the loan, I explained. The insurance adjustments, the contest winnings, the various financial supports over the years. Plus the scholarship fund using your mortgage interest, which has allowed you to help dozens of families while maintaining your dignity. Marcus was conservative in his estimates. But why? Dad asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Why go to such elaborate lengths to hide what you were doing? Because you raised me to understand that the best kind of help is the kind that preserves someone's self-respect, I replied. You worked 2 jobs after Mom died rather than accept charity from the church. You insisted on paying for my college even when I could see it was stretching you financially. You taught me that independence and pride are worth protecting. Vanessa had been growing increasingly agitated during this exchange, her perfectly manicured fingers picking at the fabric of her dress. But surely you can see how this looks from the outside. All this secrecy, all these hidden manipulations. The word came out sharper than I intended. That's not what I meant, Vanessa backtracked quickly, but the damage was done. No, I think that's exactly what you meant, I said, standing up and walking to the window that overlooked the backyard where Dad had taught me to throw a football. You're angry because your plan failed. You spent months convincing Dad that I was a burden, a disappointment, someone who didn't deserve his love or support. You painted yourself as the reasonable voice protecting him from his ungrateful daughter. I was trying to help him see reality, Vanessa insisted. Whose reality? I turned back to face her. The reality where his successful daughter was secretly ensuring his financial security. The reality where she was turning his mortgage payments into scholarships for underprivileged children. The reality where she was preserving and protecting family heirlooms while planning the perfect way to return them. Dad had been listening to this exchange with growing discomfort, his face cycling through various emotions as he processed not just what he had learned about me, but what he was learning about the woman he had been planning to build a future with. Vanessa, he said quietly, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. She turned toward him with obvious relief, clearly grateful to have his attention focused away from her confrontation with me. Of course, David, anything. If you had known the truth about Natalie's financial situation from the beginning, would you have still advised me to cut her out of my life? The question hung in the air like smoke from a fire nobody wanted to acknowledge. Vanessa's mouth opened and closed several times, her usual quick wit apparently failing her when she needed it most. That's not a fair question, she finally managed. It's the most fair question I could ask, Dad replied. Either your concerns about Natalie were based on principle, or they were based on circumstances. If they were based on principle, then her financial status shouldn't change your opinion. If they were based on circumstances, then you were essentially punishing her for being what you thought was poor. I wasn't punishing anyone, Vanessa protested. I was trying to encourage growth and independence. By suggesting she didn't deserve her mother's jewelry. I asked. By telling Dad to stop including her in family decisions. By recommending he cut off all financial and emotional support. That's not how I phrased it. That's exactly how you phrased it, Dad said, his voice growing firmer. I may have been confused about Natalie's situation, but I remember clearly what you said about her. About cutting dead weight. About prioritizing our relationship over my relationship with my daughter. Vanessa's face had gone pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. David, you're taking things out of context. Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like you spent considerable time and energy convincing me that my daughter was worthless. Now that I know she's been secretly supporting me while building a multi-million-dollar company, I have to wonder what your real motivations were. The accusation hit its mark. Vanessa's composure finally cracked completely, and her voice rose to a pitch that bordered on hysteria. My motivations: I fell in love with a man whose adult daughter seemed to be taking advantage of him. I wanted to protect someone I cared about from being used. Or I said quietly, you saw an opportunity to isolate a man from his primary family relationship so you could have complete influence over his life and decisions. That's ridiculous.
Is it?
This morning you were practically salivating over Mom's jewelry. You've been pushing Dad to make decisions that would have cut me out of inheritance considerations entirely. You've been working systematically to undermine his relationship with the only family he has left. Dad had gone very still during this exchange, his eyes fixed on Vanessa with an intensity that made her visibly uncomfortable. Vanessa, is that true? Of course not, she said quickly, but her voice lacked conviction. Because now that I think about it, Dad continued. Most of our conversations about Natalie have been initiated by you. Most of the criticisms, most of the suggestions about changing how I interact with her, most of the pressure to reconsider my priorities. I was trying to help you see things clearly. Help me see what exactly. Vanessa was trapped, and she knew it. Every answer she could give would either reveal her manipulative intentions, or confirm that her advice had been based on false assumptions. She chose deflection instead. David, this is exactly what I was talking about. Look how she's turned you against me in the space of one conversation. This is what manipulative people do. They create drama and chaos to distract from their own behavior. My behavior? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Vanessa, I've been secretly funding my father's financial security for 3 years. I've been building a business empire while maintaining the humble appearance that made him comfortable. I've been preserving family heirlooms and planning charitable foundations. What exactly have I been doing wrong? You've been lying. I've been protecting. I corrected. There's a difference between deception for personal gain and discretion for someone else's benefit. Dad stood up abruptly, pacing to the fireplace where pictures of our family covered the mantel. Photos from my childhood, from Mom's last birthday, from graduations and holidays. You know what the real tragedy is here? Neither Vanessa nor I answered. The real tragedy is that I have a daughter who built something incredible, who's been taking care of me without me even knowing it, who's been living her values so quietly that I couldn't see what was right in front of me. And instead of celebrating that, instead of being proud of what I helped create, I let someone convince me she was a failure. David, Vanessa began, but he held up a hand to stop her. I'm not finished. The other tragedy is that I was so focused on what I thought Natalie needed from me, that I never asked what she might be able to offer. I never inquired about her business beyond surface pleasantries. I never took the time to understand what she was building, or how successful she had become. You were being protective, Vanessa offered weakly. I was being blind, Dad replied. And you helped me stay that way. The room fell silent again, but this time the quiet felt different. Less tense, more resolved. Dad was beginning to see the situation clearly, and what he saw obviously disturbed him. Natalie, he said, turning away from the photos to face me directly. I owe you more than an apology, I owe you recognition. You've become exactly the kind of person your mother and I hoped you would become, and I was too proud and too foolish to see it. Dad, you don't need to. Yes, I do. You're successful, generous, thoughtful, and loyal. You've honored every value we tried to teach you while achieving things we never even dreamed of. And I let someone convince me that wasn't enough. Vanessa had been growing more desperate as the conversation continued, clearly recognizing that her position was becoming untenable. David, please don't make any hasty decisions based on emotion. We can work through this. Work through what exactly? Dad asked. Work through the fact that you systematically tried to destroy my relationship with my daughter. Work through the fact that you were completely wrong about her character and capabilities. Work through the fact that you were more interested in eliminating competition for my affection than actually understanding my family dynamics. That's not fair. Life isn't fair, Vanessa. But people should be honest. I watched this exchange with mixed emotions. Part of me felt vindicated, seeing Dad finally recognize the manipulation he had been subjected to. But another part of me felt sad for him, knowing how much this revelation must hurt. He had genuinely cared for Vanessa, had trusted her judgment, had been planning a future with her. Dad, I said gently, whatever you decide about your relationship with Vanessa is entirely your choice. I'm not going to try to influence that decision. Aren't you? Vanessa snapped. Everything you've done today has been designed to make me look bad. Everything I've done today has been designed to tell the truth. I corrected, if that makes you look bad, perhaps the problem isn't with the truth. Dad had returned to his chair, sinking into it with the weight of someone carrying a heavy burden. I need some time to think. About all of this. Of course, I said, take all the time you need. David, Vanessa said, her voice taking on the pleading tone she had used so effectively over the past several months. Don't let one difficult conversation destroy what we've built together. What have we built together? Dad asked, looking at her with new eyes. A relationship based on my ignorance about my own daughter. A future that required cutting my only child out of my life. Vanessa, if our relationship can't survive me having an accurate understanding of Natalie's worth, then maybe it's not as strong as I thought. But I love you. Do you? Or do you love the idea of me? Do you love the man who would choose you over his daughter? Do you love the inheritance potential? Do you love the stability of a relationship with someone who owns his home and has minimal family complications? Each question hit like a physical blow. Vanessa's face crumpled as she realized that Dad was systematically dismantling the foundation of their relationship. That's not fair, she whispered. Maybe not, Dad agreed. But after today, I'm not sure what's real anymore. I could see the exact moment when Vanessa realized she had lost. Her shoulders sagged, her perfect posture finally cracking under the weight of her defeat. When she spoke again, her voice was small and bitter. So that's it? You choose her? I'm not choosing anyone, Dad replied. I'm simply refusing to choose against my daughter based on false information. Same thing. No, it's really not. Vanessa stood up slowly, gathering her purse and keys with movements that seemed mechanical, automatic. I suppose there's nothing left to say then. I suppose not. She walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back to face both of us. You know, Natalie, you may have won today, but this kind of deception always comes with consequences. People don't like being made to feel foolish. Is that a threat? I asked calmly. It's an observation. Then here's my observation, I replied. People who build their relationships on tearing others down usually find themselves alone eventually. Vanessa's face flushed with anger, but she seemed to recognize that any further argument would only damage her position more. She left without another word, the front door closing behind her with a finality that seemed to echo through the house. Dad and I sat in the quiet aftermath, neither of us quite sure how to navigate this new dynamic. Everything had changed in the space of a few hours, and we both needed time to process the implications. So, Dad said finally, my daughter is a millionaire. Several times over, actually. And she's been taking care of me without me knowing it. I've been returning the favor, I corrected. You took care of me for 28 years. This is just my turn. But I could have helped with your business, could have been more supportive. Dad, you were supportive. You taught me work ethic, integrity, and independence. Those lessons are worth more than any financial investment. But I didn't even understand what you were doing. You didn't need to understand the technical details to trust that I was working hard and making good choices. That trust meant everything to me. Dad was quiet for a long moment, staring at the coffee stain on the carpet as if it held answers to questions he was afraid to ask. Natalie, can I ask you something? Anything. Are you disappointed in me? For not seeing what was happening? For listening to Vanessa instead of trusting my own judgment about you? The question broke my heart a little. This man who had raised me alone, who had sacrificed so much to give me opportunities, was now questioning his worth as a father based on one significant mistake. Dad, you're human. You fell in love with someone who told you what you wanted to hear about being a good provider and protector. You made decisions based on incomplete information because I chose to withhold complete information. If anyone should be disappointed, it should be you. Disappointed in you. For being successful and generous and thoughtful enough to protect my feelings. For not trusting you enough to handle the truth. Dad considered this for a moment, then shook his head. I think maybe you understood me better than I understood myself. If you had told me 3 years ago that you were worth millions, I probably would have felt useless, like I had nothing left to offer you. And now I understand that the most valuable thing you inherited from me and your mother wasn't money. It was character. And apparently we did something right. The weeks following Vanessa's departure brought an unexpected rhythm to our relationship. Dad had thrown himself into understanding my work with the enthusiasm of someone making up for lost time. He started calling every few days, not to offer help or express concern about my finances, but to ask genuine questions about artificial intelligence applications in small business management, or to share articles he had found about Portland's growing tech sector. I read something interesting today, he said during one of our Thursday evening phone calls, about how construction companies are using project management software to reduce waste and improve efficiency. Made me think of that first company you built. Synergy Flow was specifically designed for companies like yours. I confirmed, settling into the leather chair by my penthouse windows. The city sparkled below, but my attention was focused entirely on the pride in Dad's voice. I spent months interviewing contractors and project managers to understand the real pain points. You never told me you interviewed people in my industry. I interviewed 3 of your competitors. Actually, I admitted. But I was careful not to mention the connection. I wanted their honest feedback, not responses filtered through professional courtesy. Dad chuckled, a sound that had become more frequent since our confrontation with Vanessa. My daughter, the corporate spy. Market researcher, I corrected with a smile. Though I suppose the distinction is academic. These conversations had become a highlight of my week. For years our interactions had been limited by my determination to maintain a modest facade and his assumption that my work was somehow less substantial than traditional careers. Now, with honesty as our foundation, we were discovering a professional respect that complemented our family bond. The changes weren't limited to our phone calls. Dad had started visiting my office, something he had never done during the years when I was building my companies. The first time he walked through Catalyst Technologies headquarters, his reaction was worth every awkward conversation we had endured. "This is incredible," he said, standing in the main workspace where 47 employees collaborated on projects worth millions of dollars. "It's like a different world. It's just organized creativity," I replied, watching him take in the open floor plan. The state-of-the-art equipment, the energy of people solving complex problems. Not so different from a construction site, actually. Different tools, same goal of building something that didn't exist before. He spent 2 hours that day talking with my team members, asking about their backgrounds and their projects with the genuine curiosity of someone who wanted to understand rather than judge. Sarah Chen, my lead developer, later told me it was the first time a client's family member had asked her about the technical challenges of database optimization rather than making small talk about the weather. "Your father actually understands what we're doing here," Marcus observed after Dad's visit. "That's unusual in our industry. He's a smart man who was given incomplete information." I replied, "There's a difference between lacking knowledge and lacking capacity." But the most significant change came 3 weeks after Vanessa's departure, when Dad called with unexpected news. "I had a visitor today," he said, his voice carrying an odd mixture of amusement and irritation. "Oh, Vanessa stopped by the house." I felt my stomach tighten involuntarily.
What did she want? Apparently, she's been doing some thinking about our conversation. She wanted to apologize and see if we could work things out. And I realized that listening to her talk felt like watching someone perform a script rather than speak from the heart. Everything she said sounded calculated, designed to produce a specific response. What specifically did she say? Dad sighed heavily. She apologized for misunderstanding your situation, said she had learned her lesson about making assumptions, promised to support my relationship with you if I would give her another chance. That sounds reasonable on the surface. It did until I asked her what she had learned about you specifically, what she admired about your accomplishments, what questions she had about your business, whether she was interested in getting to know the real you, rather than the version she had constructed in her head. And she couldn't answer any of those questions without circling back to how sorry she was, and how much she loved me. Natalie, she spent 30 minutes apologizing for misjudging you, but she never once asked a single question about who you actually are. The observation was astute and painful. Vanessa was willing to acknowledge that she had been wrong about me, but only as a means to an end. She had no genuine interest in understanding or respecting the person I actually was. What did you tell her? I told her that love isn't just about accepting someone's apologies. It's about wanting to understand them, to celebrate their successes, to be curious about their thoughts and dreams. I told her that a woman who could spend months systematically undermining my relationship with my daughter wasn't someone I could trust with my future. How did she take that? About as well as you'd expect. There was crying accusations that you had poisoned me against her. Threats to tell people about your deception regarding your financial status. Threats, empty ones. Dad assured me quickly. I pointed out that you hadn't deceived anyone about anything. You had simply chosen privacy regarding your personal financial situation, which is your right. If anything, the deception had been hers, convincing me to see problems that didn't exist.
I felt a wave of relief mixed with pride. Dad wasn't just defending me, he was demonstrating a clear understanding of the difference between discretion and deception, between protecting someone's dignity and manipulating their perceptions. There's something else, Dad continued. She made some comments about your business, suggesting that tech companies are unstable and that your success might not last. She seemed to think this was a compelling argument for why I shouldn't be impressed by your accomplishments. Tech companies can be volatile, I acknowledged. She's not entirely wrong about that. Maybe not, but her point wasn't about helping me understand potential risks. Her point was about diminishing your achievements. She wanted me to see your success as temporary and unreliable, so I would focus on what she characterized as more stable relationship investments. Meaning her. But here's what she didn't understand and what I should have seen months ago. Even if your company failed tomorrow, even if you lost every dollar you've earned, you would still be the person who built something extraordinary from nothing. You would still be someone who used her success to quietly help others. You would still be my daughter, and that would still be more important than any other relationship in my life. The conversation marked a turning point in ways I hadn't anticipated. Dad's rejection of Vanessa's return wasn't just about their relationship, it was about his fundamental understanding of values and priorities. He had chosen substance over convenience, character over manipulation, family loyalty over romantic possibility. But Vanessa's visit had consequences beyond Dad's renewed confidence in his decision. 2 days later, I received a call from Helen Rodriguez, a local business reporter who specialized in covering Portland's startup scene. Miss Brooks, I'm working on a story about successful young entrepreneurs who maintain modest public profiles. I've been told you might be an interesting subject for this piece. I generally don't do media interviews, I replied carefully. I understand, but I've been given some intriguing information about your business success and your family situation. I think our readers would find your story inspiring. My blood ran cold. What kind of information? Information suggesting that you've been hiding your wealth from your family, allowing them to believe you're struggling financially while you've actually achieved considerable success. The source characterized it as a case study in millennial deception and family manipulation. Who is your source? I can't reveal that information, but I can tell you that they seem quite knowledgeable about your personal situation. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar weight of dealing with petty revenge from people who couldn't accept responsibility for their own poor choices. Miss Rodriguez, would you be willing to meet in person to discuss this story? I think there might be some context you're missing. Of course, would tomorrow work? Tomorrow would be perfect. The meeting took place at my office, with Marcus present as both business partner and witness. Helen Rodriguez turned out to be a thoughtful journalist in her 50s who specialized in nuanced business stories rather than sensational exposés. Miss Brooks, I want to be transparent with you, she began after we had settled in my conference room. The person who contacted me about your story seemed less interested in celebrating your success than in exposing what they characterized as deceptive behavior. I see. And what exactly did they claim I had done? They suggested that you had deliberately misled your family about your financial status, allowing your father to provide financial support while secretly being wealthy yourself. They portrayed this as a form of elder abuse. Marcus and I exchanged glances. Vanessa's accusations were more serious than we had anticipated. Miss Rodriguez, I said carefully, would you be interested in seeing documentation that might provide a different perspective on this situation? Over the next hour, I walked Helen through the same information Marcus had shared with Dad and Vanessa, but with additional documentation that painted a complete picture. Bank records showing the anonymous financial support I had provided to Dad. Legal documents establishing the scholarship fund. Insurance records proving the legitimate nature of the fortunate coincidences that had helped my father's financial stability. This is remarkable, Helen said, reviewing the scholarship fund documentation. You've been using your father's mortgage payments to fund educational opportunities for children of construction workers. The interest portion, yes. Dad still owns his home, still builds equity with each payment, but instead of that money going to some distant bank, it's helping families in his industry achieve educational goals. And he didn't know about any of this. He didn't know about the financial mechanisms, but he knew about the scholarship fund. He helped me select the first recipients based on his knowledge of workers in the local construction community. Helen looked up from the documents with obvious confusion. I don't understand how this constitutes deception or manipulation. It doesn't, Marcus said firmly. What it constitutes is a successful entrepreneur choosing discretion over ostentation and prioritizing her father's dignity over her own recognition. Who told you this was a story about deception? I asked. Helen hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with revealing her source even indirectly. Someone who claimed to have intimate knowledge of your family dynamics. Someone who suggested that your father had been taken advantage of by his own daughter. Someone who had a vested interest in destroying my relationship with my father. I'm beginning to suspect that might be the case. I made a decision that surprised even myself. Rodriguez, would you be interested in the real story? Not the one about deception and manipulation, but the one about a daughter who built a successful company while quietly ensuring her father's financial security and turning family wealth into community investment. That would be a much more compelling story. Helen agreed. Then let me introduce you to some people. The scholarship recipients, the employees who have become millionaires through equity sharing, the small business owners whose operations have been transformed by our software solutions. Let me show you what success looks like when it's built on values rather than ego. The interview process took 3 days. Helen spoke with scholarship recipients who had gone from community college to 4-year universities with the support of the Brooks Family Foundation. She interviewed my employees about the equity sharing program that had created wealth for dozens of families. She spoke with Dad about his pride in my accomplishments and his gratitude for the discretion I had shown in supporting him. Most importantly, she spoke with the small business owners whose operations had been revolutionized by Synergy Flow and Catalyst Technologies' current projects. Construction companies that had reduced waste by 30%, architectural firms that had streamlined their client communication processes, engineering consultancies that had doubled their project capacity through better resource management. This isn't just a story about financial success, Helen told me during our final interview session. This is a story about using business success to create positive change at multiple levels. Your companies have transformed how small businesses operate. Your scholarship fund has changed educational opportunities for working-class families, and your approach to family relationships has preserved dignity while providing security. It's also a story about what happens when people make assumptions based on appearances, I added. And what happens when those assumptions are used to justify destructive behavior. Are you willing to go on record about the source of the original allegations? I considered this carefully. Naming Vanessa publicly would be satisfying, but it would also be petty. The truth of my character and accomplishments was compelling enough without resorting to personal attacks. I'd prefer to let the facts speak for themselves. I said finally. People can draw their own conclusions about motivations. The article ran 2 weeks later with the headline "The Quiet Success: How Portland Entrepreneur Natalie Brooks Built Millions While Building Community." It featured photos of scholarship recipients, interviews with employees about the equity sharing program, and quotes from small business owners whose operations had been transformed by our software solutions. Dad called me 15 minutes after the article went live online. "Natalie, I just read the most incredible article about this amazing entrepreneur who has revolutionized small business management while creating educational opportunities for construction workers' children." "Oh, really? Sounds like an interesting person."
She is.
"In fact, I'm incredibly proud to be her father." The pride in his voice was unmistakable, and I felt something settle in my chest that I hadn't realized was displaced. For the first time in years, my professional success and my family relationship were aligned rather than in tension. "Dad, there's something I want to ask you." "Anything." "The house needs some updates, doesn't it? The kitchen is still from the 1990s, and I know you've been talking about renovating the bathroom." "It could use some work," he admitted. "But renovations are expensive, and I'm trying to be more careful with money." "What if I told you that Catalyst Technologies was looking for a general contractor for some office renovations, and that we'd be willing to pay premium rates for work that meets our quality standards?" Dad was quiet for a moment. "Natalie, are you offering me work?" "I'm offering you an opportunity to bid on legitimate construction projects that happen to pay well enough to fund some personal home improvements. If you're interested." "You know I'm interested. But I want to earn that work, not have it handed to me because you're my daughter." "Dad, you've been running a successful construction business for 25 years. Your reputation in this city is impeccable. Any contractor we hired would be lucky to have your experience and integrity. In that case, I'd be honored to submit a bid." "Good. Marcus will send you the project specifications tomorrow." After I hung up, I sat in my office looking out at the Portland skyline and thinking about the strange turns life could take. 6 months ago, I had been carefully managing my father's perception of my success to protect his pride. Now we were planning to work together as professionals while maintaining our relationship as family. The change hadn't come without cost. Vanessa's betrayal had hurt Dad more than he admitted, and his trust in romantic relationships would probably be damaged for years. But the crisis had also forced us to rebuild our connection on a foundation of honesty rather than protection, respect rather than condescension. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. The message was brief but unmistakable in its intent. "Enjoy your moment. This isn't over." I deleted the message without responding. Some people, when faced with the consequences of their choices, chose growth and reflection. Others chose bitterness and revenge. I couldn't control which path Vanessa would choose, but I could control how I responded to whatever came next. The important thing was that Dad and I were finally seeing each other clearly. Everything else was just noise. 6 months after the article's publication, I stood in the executive boardroom of Catalyst Technologies watching Dad present renovation proposals to our board of directors. His confidence was unmistakable as he outlined timeline projections and material specifications with the expertise of someone who had spent decades perfecting his craft. "The structural modifications to accommodate the expanded server room will require specialized steel reinforcement," he explained, pointing to detailed blueprints spread across the mahogany table. "My team has experience with this type of technical infrastructure support from our work on medical facilities and research laboratories." Marcus nodded approvingly from across the table. "Mr. Brooks, your proposal is comprehensive and your timeline is realistic. The safety protocols you've outlined exceed our requirements." "I don't cut corners," Dad replied simply. "Especially not when my daughter's business depends on the quality of my work." The board approved his bid unanimously. Not because of family connections, but because his proposal was genuinely superior to the competition. Dad had earned this contract through professional merit, and the pride on his face when they announced their decision was worth every complicated moment that had brought us to this point. After the meeting, we walked through the current office space together, discussing the renovation plans and timeline. Dad moved through the workspace with the practiced eye of someone who understood both structure and function, asking thoughtful questions about workflow patterns and equipment requirements. "You know," he said, pausing near the window that overlooked downtown Portland, "I keep thinking about that conversation with Vanessa. About how she said your success might not last. That tech companies are unstable.
She wasn't entirely wrong about the volatility, I admitted. This industry does change rapidly. But that's not what bothered me about her comment. What bothered me was that she thought the stability of your bank account was more important than the character that built it. Even if you lost everything tomorrow, you'd still be the person who created jobs for 47 people, who turned mortgage interest into college scholarships, who solved real problems for hundreds of small businesses. You really understand what I've built here. I understand that you took the values your mother and I tried to teach you and used them to create something that makes the world a little better. That's not something that can be lost in a market downturn. The renovation project became a symbol of our new relationship dynamic. Dad's crew worked efficiently and professionally, treating the job with the same attention to detail they brought to any project. But there were moments when I could see him watching his work environment with obvious pride, knowing that his craftsmanship was contributing to his daughter's continued success. Your father's crew is impressive, Sarah Chen commented during one of their workdays. They're incredibly respectful of our equipment and workspace. Most contractors treat office renovations like they're just moving furniture around. Dad doesn't do anything halfway, I replied, watching him direct his team with the quiet authority of someone who had earned respect through competence rather than title. The professional relationship enhanced rather than complicated our personal connection. Our dinner conversations now included discussions of project timelines and business challenges, but they also included the comfortable family dynamics that had always defined us. Dad had found a way to be proud of my success without feeling diminished by it, and I had learned to share my achievements without worrying about protecting his ego. 3 weeks into the renovation, I received a call that brought unwelcome news back into our peaceful progress. Brooks, this is Detective Amanda Foster with Portland Police. I need to speak with you about some concerning communications your office has received. What kind of communications? Threatening messages that reference your recent media coverage and your family relationships. Have you been experiencing any harassment since that article was published? I thought about Vanessa's text message and several similar communications that had arrived sporadically over the months. I had dismissed them as empty posturing from someone dealing poorly with rejection, but apparently the situation had escalated. Some messages, yes. I assumed they were just someone venting frustration. Miss Brooks, we take all threats seriously, especially when they involve successful business owners. Can you come in to file a formal report? The police station visit revealed that Vanessa's harassment had extended beyond simple text messages. She had contacted several of my business clients with allegations about my character, attempted to file complaints with professional organizations about unethical business practices, and had been spreading rumors in Portland's business community about my supposed deception of family members. The pattern suggests escalating behavior. Detective Foster explained as she reviewed the documentation. This isn't just someone who's angry about a failed relationship, this is someone who's systematically trying to damage your professional reputation. What can be done about it? We can issue a restraining order based on the pattern of harassment. We can also investigate whether any of her communications constitute criminal threats or defamation. The restraining order was issued within a week, but the damage to some of my business relationships had already occurred. 2 potential clients had withdrawn from contract negotiations after receiving Vanessa's allegations, and several professional organizations had initiated ethics reviews based on her complaints. This is exactly what she wanted. Marcus observed during one of our crisis management meetings. She couldn't destroy your relationship with your father, so she's trying to destroy your professional reputation instead. The ethics reviews will clear me, I said with more confidence than I felt. The documentation of my business practices is thorough and transparent. But the clients who walked away may not come back, even after you're cleared. Doubt once planted can be difficult to eliminate. Dad's reaction to the harassment campaign was swift and decisive. He called an emergency meeting with his construction industry contacts, many of whom had connections throughout Portland's business community. I want everyone to understand something clearly, he announced to the group of contractors, architects, and project managers who had gathered in his office. My daughter has revolutionized how our industry manages projects. Her software has saved companies millions of dollars in waste and inefficiency. Any attacks on her character are attacks on someone who has made all of our lives easier. The support from Dad's professional network was overwhelming. Construction company owners began reaching out to share testimonials about Synergy Flow's impact on their operations. Architects started recommending Catalyst technologies to clients who needed project management solutions. The business community that Vanessa had tried to turn against me instead rallied to support someone they recognized as a valuable industry innovator. Your father's reputation in this city is gold, Helen Rodriguez told me when she called to follow up on the harassment story. When David Brooks vouches for someone's character, people listen. The ethics reviews concluded within 6 weeks, finding no evidence of improper business practices or deceptive client relationships. The police investigation resulted in additional charges against Vanessa for harassment and attempted defamation. But more importantly, the crisis had demonstrated the strength of the professional relationships I had built over years of honest business practices. You know what the most satisfying part of this whole situation has been? Dad asked during one of our weekly dinners at his newly renovated kitchen. What's that? Watching you handle it with grace and professionalism instead of sinking to her level. You could have destroyed her reputation just as easily as she tried to destroy yours, but you chose to let your work speak for itself. Revenge would have been a distraction from building something better. That's exactly what I mean. You handled a crisis the way your mother would have handled it, with dignity and focus on what really matters. The comparison to Mom was the highest compliment Dad could offer, and it marked a complete transformation in how he saw my professional life. I was no longer his daughter who worked with computers. I was his daughter who had built something meaningful and handled challenges with character. The IPO launched 8 months later, exceeding even Marcus's optimistic projections. Catalyst Technologies went public at $42 per share, giving the company a market valuation of $93 million. My personal stake was worth $67 million on paper, making me one of Portland's youngest self-made multimillionaires. Dad attended the opening bell ceremony in New York, standing on the trading floor wearing a suit he had bought specifically for the occasion. When the opening trades pushed our stock price to $48, he was the first person to congratulate me. I am so proud of what you've accomplished, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Not just the money but everything it represents. The problems you've solved, the people you've helped, the values you've maintained. We accomplished this together. I corrected. You raised me to work hard, to treat people fairly, to build something meaningful rather than just chase success. And you took those lessons further than I ever imagined possible. The success brought new opportunities and new responsibilities. The Brooks Family Foundation expanded its scholarship program to cover full 4-year university tuition for qualifying students. My employees who had participated in the equity sharing program found themselves with retirement security decades earlier than they had planned. The small businesses using our software solutions continued to grow and prosper. But perhaps the most meaningful change was in my relationship with Dad. We had become true partners, both personally and professionally. His construction company became Catalyst Technologies' preferred contractor for all facility projects. My business success provided resources for his favorite charitable causes. Most importantly, we had learned to see each other as complete people rather than limiting ourselves to traditional parent-child roles. You know, Dad said during the celebration dinner following the IPO, I keep thinking about what would have happened if I had listened to Vanessa's advice completely. If I had cut you out of my life to prioritize that relationship. You would have figured out eventually that something was wrong. Maybe. But I might have missed years of getting to know the incredible person you've become. I might have missed being part of this journey. The journey isn't over, I reminded him. This is just the beginning of what we can build together. 6 months after the IPO, I received a letter forwarded through my attorney's office. The return address showed it was from a minimum security facility where Vanessa was serving a sentence for harassment and defamation. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was surprisingly brief, and lacked the manipulative tone I had come to associate with her communications. It was a simple apology, acknowledging that her actions had been driven by jealousy and wounded pride rather than any legitimate grievance. She admitted that she had underestimated both my character and my father's wisdom in seeing through her manipulation. I showed the letter to Dad during our next dinner together. What do you think? He asked after reading it. I think she's learned something about consequences, I replied. Whether she's learned anything about character remains to be seen. Are you going to respond? No. Some chapters are better left closed. Dad nodded and handed the letter back to me. Your mother always said that the best revenge against people who try to diminish you is to keep growing into the person you're meant to become. She was right about that.
She was right about a lot of things. Including you. We finished dinner talking about the Foundation's next scholarship recipients and Dad's upcoming project with a local community center. The conversation was comfortable and optimistic, focused on the future we were building rather than the past we had overcome. Later that evening, as I drove home through the Portland streets where I had grown up, I reflected on how much had changed since that morning, when I had overheard Vanessa's manipulative conversation with Dad. The crisis that could have destroyed our relationship had instead strengthened it by forcing us to build it on honesty rather than protection. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Board meeting moved to 10 tomorrow. Also 3 new contract proposals came in today. Business is good. Business was indeed good. But more importantly, family was better than it had ever been. Dad and I had learned to see each other clearly, to respect each other completely, and to build something together that honored both our shared values and our individual strengths. Some people spend their lives trying to choose between professional success and family relationships, as if the two were mutually exclusive. I had discovered that when both are built on the same foundation of character and integrity, they enhance rather than compete with each other. The city lights sparkled ahead of me as I drove toward home, toward the life I had built through hard work and honest values. Behind me was a father who finally understood what his daughter had accomplished, and who was proud not just of my success, but of the person I had remained while achieving it. That, more than any IPO or business valuation, was the true measure of wealth. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.